All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Career Pathways panel. I'm Ceri Hutton, Director of Industry Development and Programs for the Interactive Games and Entertainment Association. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we meet today on the lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong peoples. Sovereignty was never ceded, and as such, these lands always have been and always will continue to be Aboriginal land. So I pay my respects to elders past and present and recognise the important connection that they have with the land. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people who may be joining us today. So welcome everyone. Welcome to the Career Pathways panel. Now, before I introduce you to our wonderful panel, I'd like to do some quick housekeeping. Toilets are located near the large staircase that you passed on your way in. Just right back there, you can't miss them. Food will be served once the panel concludes, and we'll have a variety of options for dietary requirements. Once the panel concludes, we will be stacking away some of these chairs to open up the space a little bit, but feel free to utilise the foyer area as well. There will be a bar service, which includes a small bar tab. Please ensure you drink responsibly, as any antisocial behaviour will not be tolerated. In case of an emergency, the fire alarm will sound, and you will need to exit the venue in a calm manner. The main fire exit is exactly the way that you came. Right in the front door. There is another fire exit out this side, but that has a staircase, so it is not wheelchair accessible. And we've now gotten through the housekeeping and now some quick thank yous. So firstly, I'd like to thank City of Port Phillip for making this event happen. So this event is part of the SMART program, which focuses on the growth of diverse and emerging talent. This event and the entire program itself was only made possible because of City of Port Phillip's Games Action Plan, which continually creates opportunities for creatives to learn and grow. Massive thank you to James Shutt and Richard Sawada, who are instrumental in making this all happen. Big thank you to the Pride Centre for being such wonderful hosts, because it is beautiful in here. We're so happy to be here. And Joy for handling all of the tech tonight. And that's all the housekeeping sorted. So let's get underway and meet our panelists. So, to kick it off, starting all the way down there, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're currently working on.
Yeah, cool, thanks. My name is Matthew Jackson. Are we doing first name and last name? Feels very formal, but I've done it now. I am one half of Toot Games, a small independent game studio here in Melbourne. I am working on a game called My Arms Are Longer Now, which is a silly 2D game where you play as a very long arm that does heists. Yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Matt.
Hi, I'm Maddy Clute. I'll put my last name in there just so certain people don't feel alone. I run Osaurus Studios, which is a small game studio, so I'm 1/4 of the studio. And we're making a game called Call of the Golden Valley, which, if you want to think about it, it's like Gone Home meets Picnic at Hanging Rock. It's people are going missing in the Victorian High Country, and you have to go up there and see what's what and where people have gone.
Thank you, Maddy.
Hi, I'm Alex. My pronouns are he, him. I am the game writer and narrative designer at Lumi Interactive. We're working on a title called Kinda World, which is a well-being game. It's kind of blurring the lines between something like Headspace and something like Animal Crossing, maybe.
Awesome. Claps. My name is Katy Nethercote. I am the social content specialist at Summerfall Studios, and we very recently just launched our very first game, Stray Gods, the role-playing musical. It is a role-playing musical video game, and it just came out.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you to my wonderful panelists for joining me today. I'm really excited for this one. And I'm already loving the energy of this audience, the respectful claps each time. Keep that up. All right. So kicking off, Maddy, I'm going to have you lead this one. What was it that enticed you into the games industry?
Right. So actually, I actively avoided the games industry for about 10 to 15 years.
We got you. We got you, though.
You got me. So my background is in computer science and like straightforward commercial software. So being a computer science student, there were lots of people who had ambitions of making games. I was not one of them, mostly because the games that were available at the time didn't really resonate with me, and I didn't want to write like combat systems for things. And then I did that for 7 years, and then I got a bit bored during lockdown, and just started like messing around with Unity, and then I expected that there would be a point where I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, that's too hard, like put it away. That was a fun little lockdown project, and it never happened, and now I have a funded game studio. So I got here kind of by accident, but the reason I stayed was I realized you could do like 6-dimensional storytelling. Like you have so many more levers that you can pull with games compared to books or TV. Like it's just so multi-dimensional, and I was completely hooked. So I'm happy I'm here now.
Wonderful. And with the Call of the Golden Valley, was that the project that you went straight in with when you were playing around, or did you just dabble with a few different ideas first?
I did a couple like little. At first, I was going to do a hand illustrated game, and then I quickly figured out how much work that would be and decided against it. But yeah, no, it kind of is my first one, this is against every bit of advice you see online of like, don't jump into a giant multi-year project. Do something small and manageable at first. I didn't, so.
Yeah, do as I say, not as I do.
It's fine so far.
All right, and I'll throw this to the rest of the panel. What lured you into the games industry?
So for me, I kind of I wanted to be in games since I was like 16, and I think I even though it would have been like better at the time if I just threw myself at it, I just said that I couldn't do it. I was like, oh, I can't program. I don't know how to do any art. I was like watching YouTube videos about how to make games. I was like, I can't do that. And so I sort of went on into like different creative industries for many years. I worked in like, I did a degree in English Lit and went into like the publishing industry for like a year. And then I like stopped doing that, and I did like theater stuff. I still teach like improv, but like I did like perform at the comedy festival and did like theater stuff for like 6 years. And then it got to like a certain point where I still really wanted to make games. It was like this medium. Like I stopped working in literary stuff and theater because I was like, I don't love books that much. This is not what I'm doing with my free time as much. Like I like the idea of being a writer, but I don't actually read that much. Like I'm at home playing games. And yeah, it got to a certain point where I was like, I had a good teacher on like an IT intro Unilink course at Swinburne who was like, just like, that sort of pointed out that I was putting up like these invisible barriers for me. And then, yeah, like I guess it's just working in those, getting to make games was sort of something that I'd always had to call a little bit. But yeah.
Has anyone else had that invisible barriers moment, like where you've self-created something and decided that you can't do it, and then realized, oh, that wall is just a tiny little hurdle, and I can just push it over and walk right past it? Has anyone else had one of those moments?
100%. Yeah. I didn't plan to work in games. That was not the plan. I didn't think I could. From the outside when I was a teenager, it just never felt like something that, I don't know, a girl who likes theatre, hi, I'm also a theatre kid, would get to do. And so that was a huge thing for me. In fact, I'll spin this into my background here. Gaming was not the plan at all. My background is in performing. I have an undergrad in acting, which I then tried to do, and then I did a lot of retail. I did work for EB Games for a number of years.
Quick litmus test. Put your hand up if you worked at EB Games or Zing. Oh wow, I thought that was going to be so many more people. It's like, I swear it's like 1 in 8 people that I meet in the industry worked at EB Games at some point.
Yeah, we'll share trauma stories over there. And then I randomly was like, I want to go back to uni. Retail is hell. And I did communications, and then I was working in just marketing and doing freelancing stuff. And then this project Stray Gods came up, and I had a friend who really loves me and knows my skill set and went, you have to apply to this. And I literally was like, it's games. why? Like, I love video games, I love stories, but I don't understand. And then I read the listing and I actually went through my skill set and I was like, oh, hang on, I am this person. I can work in games. So that was, yeah.
Yeah. I had a similar experience moving to Melbourne and applying for a job over here. I'm just like, it was like, oh, my skill set is so eclectic and it would never be useful for anything. And then a job came up. I'm like, that's a bullet point list of everything I can do.
Very that.
Alex, what enticed you into games?
Final Fantasy IX. I've just had a lifelong love of games, and yeah, like most people, kind of wrote it off as ever being possible. I'm from New Zealand, and there was just kind of like no video game industry there for a really long time. So I ended up studying. I still had a love for writing. I kind of always wanted to be a narrative designer and game writer. But I went into more just broad creative writing, ended up working in marketing as a content writer, studied poetry for some reason. Yeah, and then as the New Zealand games industry was kind of coming up, I managed to get my foot in the door. That was nice.
Fantastic. All right, so we're going to talk about skills now. Matt, I'm going to have you lead this one. What is a skill that you learned outside of your game development career that's proven incredibly useful to you now?
Yeah, so I think it's sort of like, and this might be like not the, maybe this is like the gooey answer, but kind of like everything. Like there's so, especially going from like, because I used to work at Fire Monkeys, working on Need for Speed No Limits, working like a much bigger company where like I was a designer and I had quite a very specific set of tasks that I needed to do. But like going to working in indie, like every project that I've ever been on has like helped for it in some way. In more specific sense, I would say that like the time I spent working, like doing improv stuff, like just like performing in the comedy festival and like doing like a little show every week or so for several years helped a lot. Just because doing improv is like great for silencing that inner critic of yourself, especially like early on when you're working on a creative project that's going like, this sucks. This wasn't the perfect idea that was in my head. Yeah, it's really great for that because you're up on stage like doing something that is objectively like very underbaked, like just by like the way that works. And yeah, that's been great. Especially also like all the theatre stuff has helped massively in terms of like creative communication and collaboration. I think that almost matters like more than like the technical skills in terms of like actually finding a job, like how you can connect with somebody and talk to somebody and convince them that you're not going to be a nightmare to work with is like, yeah, one of the more powerful skills.
Katy, have you found that like theatre has like pulled into your job?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. As you're saying that, I'm aggressively nodding at you. I completely agree. I think that last point that you were making, I think the like skills of listening and really like being present with other people is like surprisingly relevant in an office environment making games. You wouldn't think it, but here we are. And just being able to hear other people and listen and understand. And I would also add being kind is like a really big one for me. Like if you're good to work with, people will want to work with you. And if they can't work with you right now, they'll remember that you're good to work with and that you're nice. And people like nice people.
I'll add, as like I think the token programmer on the panel, it's actually a lot easier to teach people how to code than how to be a reasonable adult. And so, yeah, if I had to pick between the two, like let's work on your coding.
Yeah, I would say actually one of the things that I've learned outside of game development that was really useful for doing game development is just in marketing, learning about marketing personas, and it's just everything to do with marketing, to be honest, because you're really learning about who your target audience is. And in marketing, that's, who am I selling this product to? What do they like? How do they want me to speak to them? And you'll apply that same logic to games in your game marketing. But in the actual game development, you're going to be thinking about, who would play this game? What do they like? Where are they? Where can I reach them? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot in that.
So much.
I feel that people hear the word marketing and they think communications, they think like social media, but it's like marketing is like 20% communication. Marketing is about design and understanding your consumer and like what their needs are. And that is so important in game design, like incredibly important. That one of the top traps that I've seen like a lot of emerging talent fall in is making yourself the target audience. It's like you're not the audience. That you need to understand who their personas and the user journey and like what problem you're trying to solve and what the unique aspects of your game are. Otherwise, it's just going to make every single decision personal because you are designing for yourself.
Can I actually also add, even though I made a joke about studying poetry earlier, poetry is a really, really concise writing form. You have really limited space in a poem to get your point across, and that's super useful for writing for the screen and for interactive games because with some exceptions, no one really plays games to read. Some people really do play games to read. I am playing Baldur's Gate and I read everything. But the quicker and more impactfully you can get your point across, the better if you're interested in writing for games. Yeah.
I'll also just add that these skill sets aren't just for like the people in your office or your players. It also goes like above you when you're convincing people to give you money to make your game. Very, very important, and that's a different form of marketing.
And in terms of talking to people as well as up the chain, it's also to your audience as well. I was just thinking that I'm like, all of my retail skills of like talking to a consumer and understanding where they're coming from and knowing that they are wrong, but still listening to them anyway is so applicable to a lot of marketing and community management stuff, especially. Just holding the person and acknowledging that it's frustrating and it's very difficult and that really sucks for you. And also your understanding of this is completely inaccurate, but you don't tell them that bit.
Yeah. The customer is always wrong, but you still have to be nice to them.
Correct.
Yeah, I think if we have a little bit more time to talk about this, I think it's like maybe like a theme that we probably would talk about more is like when you're when you're really new to getting into games, there's like an illusion of like you will be spending all your time like crafting a game when like so much more of that time is going to be spent doing other things to make sure that people will end up playing that game ends up existing, like, yeah, and communication will revolve around everything outside of that.
Yeah, how I'll dig into that a little bit, particularly for Matt and Maddy on this one. How have you found like leadership, like leading a studio and having to take your hands off of the creative process to make way for all of the other bits and bobs that come into management?
I've been through like the manager path or manager transition before. In my previous career, I was an engineer, and then at some point they were like, would you like to manage other engineers instead? And I said yes to that. So you will mess it up. Sometimes you'll mess it up in like spectacular and unforeseen ways. I'm really glad that I did that with someone else's money and not when it was my company. So yeah, it's definitely a transition and giving some separation and just thinking like what's best for the game. Like I can 3D model. I enjoy it. I find it relaxing. It is not best for the game for me to 3D model. Right, and I just keep asking myself like, what's best for the game, and taking my own ego out of it.
Yeah. So I'd say that like, I agree with all of that, and that for me, I'm pretty lucky in terms of whilst I am like in like more of a leadership position, I'm also like co-leading it with. Millie Hutton's the other half of 2 Games. She's over there.
Wave to the people.
Slight
really.
wave. So there's like, whilst there is like some management, and like we have like a handful of contractors there, but a lot of the contractors that we're working with are people that we have been doing game jams with and working with for like 4 years now or so, and are like people that we've been doing like are like friends and improvisers that we've been doing like small projects with and performing with and making jokes with for so long that there's like I don't think it's like great advice to be like just work with your friends, because that could spectacularly go wrong in certain professional settings. But there is something to be said for like having a group of people where you have you know how each other work, and you can live in each other's brains a little bit in terms of like the vision for what you're pushing towards. But also it's hard. It's so hard to delegate well, and to sort of give direction on things that you yourself need direction for. It's a process.
I think that a big word that you said in there that I'm going to latch onto is vision, because I've seen many an emerging studio form around straight out of university teams of people creating studios on relationships and convenience that tend to fall apart. Vision, though, like that's the unifying thing of like whether or not you can work with your friends is like, do you have a shared goal or of a vision of what you're trying to achieve? And is that nice and clear and everybody understands that? Because that's going to make a massive difference in conflict. And there will be conflict. Every creative process will have conflict. You cannot avoid it at all.
So for us, like one of the guiding principles, and we've had a great consultant who sort of has helped us like figure that out. And we're in pre-production at the moment, and a big part of our pre-production is not necessarily just making like the vertical slice that we're working towards, but even like on the terms that we got funded by Vic Screen was like, we're figuring out how to be a studio and what sort of practices. And so one of the guiding principles that sort of pushes the vision of the game is, because we're making a comedy game, it's like everybody who works on it, we got to find funny. Like everyone has to like make each other laugh. And like one of those winning principles for like, especially on a game where we're sort of making things where it's like the joke trumps any mechanic, the joke should trump like the art, like how pretty it is or something. You can be like, well, what does everyone find the funniest? And like when you've been making like comedic content for a while together, that becomes an easy process to sort.
Yeah, I love that. All right. So I'm going to move on to the next question. And Katy, I'm going to have you lead this one. What's a key skill or lesson you've learned or are still learning since you've begun working in games?
Okay. So I feel like important context here is that I am a games baby. I started working in the industry in January. I am a small child in a trench coat. I hope you all respect that. I think honestly the biggest skill that I am employing and learning is curiosity. So I'm always asking questions. I am always everywhere in the office, watching what people are doing, trying to understand from a genuine place of curiosity, what do you do? What's happening? Our art director, Ben, quite frequently has to gently close things in front of me and hope that I get the point because the boundary has been set and I should probably go away. But it also means that I understand his role better. And so if I understand what he's doing, anytime our departments have to interact, that conversation, that communication is so much easier. And that's every single department. And particularly for games where people are wearing multiple hats, you've got heaps of different departments that are very specialised in some circumstances. Being able to stay curious and understand and see each other, I find makes me so much better at my job because I'm able to communicate. Because marketing can often be shoehorned off to the side. We have a joke in my office, we're called Marketing Island because there's like the mainland, which is the devs, and then we're off on Marketing Island always swooping in being like, can someone make me a graphic? But by knowing what everyone's doing and staying curious, understanding them, and then also them reflecting that back on us. So we'll often have people asking us about strategy and we will always communicate back exactly what we're doing. And also being curious, I think being curious when you fail and when you get something wrong is so important. If you can feel the pain and the frustration, but if you can also be like, okay, but why? Like, why did this fail? What part of this can I learn about, improve? Was it within my control? Will make you better at what you do. So curiosity.
Well said.
Thank you so much.
Very eloquent way of saying what I was going to add, which was just a thing that I've learned is specifically talking to engineers, which I just saw one of my coworkers laugh. which is like a result of curiosity, really, is just understanding like what do they actually need to know, because as not a technical person at all, for me asking for a feature is really straightforward. I'm just like, yes, this, and then when I'm talking to technical people, they're like, there are so many things that you have not defined in this question. So yeah, learning what other people need to know for you to get the result that you want.
That's like a perfect example. I literally this week we've been working on a patch, and my boss who runs marketing is not here at the moment, so I'm doing it by myself. Thank you, I'm really doing a great job. But it's involved. I'm not a technical person. Like I don't code. I don't understand what any of this means. But because I've got this relationship with our engineering team, we know how to talk to each other. And so I literally today sat down with my engineer and was like, hey, I have to write these patch notes. Can you explain to me what this means? And our engineer, Troy, he's amazing. He's such a clear communicator. And so he was able to go, okay, this is what this means. This is what I think you need to know. And then I'm able to hold, okay, what are my audience expectations? What's the management thing here? And we can talk to each other and understand each other. And it means that we're both better at our jobs. Yeah.
I love that. I think a note that I kind of took here is like, so one of the things that I do with my colleagues is we run the games conference GCAP. It's been run for 17 years now. And one of the most popular programming talks we've ever had in that time was a programming talk that was about how to be a kind, curious, and good communicating engineer. So that should really and that I love that. I absolutely love that idea. I really think that it's important to understand what everybody's roles are and communicate, and that's what makes you excellent in your role. So excellent points. Maddy, key skills or lesson you've learned or still learning in games?
I'd say from like a little bit more of a programming perspective. So I do like the design and the programming for our game. The programming thing that is a lesson I've learned and keep learning painfully over and over again is to not make something that already exists. Don't reinvent the wheel. If there's a package out there or an asset on a store that does the thing that you want it to do, don't make it yourself. Pay the $60 or whatever it is, especially for a prototype, to just do that. Because so many times over and over again, I'm like, oh, there goes a week, and I could have just installed this in a day.
Actually, what you said, one thing that I apply very often to my business is something I got from planning my wedding, which was sometimes the cheapest way to pay is with money.
That's so good.
Right? If you've got some, use it. Your time is also worth things.
I think I had that with I'm currently doing all the bookkeeping at our studio, and I talked to a friend who also runs a indie studio, and he was like, yeah, it was expensive, but the amount of mental weight that just lifted off me was immense, and I'm like, that I can't wait.
Yeah, people often forget that time is a much more precious resource than money. That, yeah. Just pay your way out if you can. Pay your way out.
Yeah, if you
hire
can.
your way out. If you can. If you've got your Screen Australia or Vic Screen funding, get it. Put it in the budget early. Sort it out.
Yeah.
Don't do your own legal stuff.
Yeah. Ask other people for. This is probably one of the best things I learned for if you've never pitched for funding before. Ask a successful applicant. If you can look at their budget kindly, nicely, and without the expectation that they will definitely, but if you've not made a budget before, that will be so helpful. It will point out pitfalls that you didn't realize exist. Make sure that you put in money for legal consultations and stuff like that. But, yeah.
I think also on the topic of do you do it yourself or do you spend money, one thing that I'm still learning is recognizing when something is good enough. Just because ultimately like what you're going to prototype or get out there is not what the finished product is going to be. It's a great idea to be able to put something out in front of other people in a controlled environment that is like good enough. They're going to tell you everything that's wrong with it anyway. So you may as well get something good enough out there and see what you can learn from that.
I actually think that ties back to personas a little bit, because something that I often tell emerging talent is part of that persona conversation about not being your own target audience is that it changes what the question of is it finished is, because you then, and I love that you used the word like good enough, like it's perfect for this, because instead of going, is this game done? Is this up to the level of standard I personally want it to be up to, which you won't achieve because you are always going to be your own worst critic. You can then say, okay, my persona is Sharon, the 34-year-old mum who's playing this mobile game on a train for 5 minutes. Like, you've designed your persona clearly, and you can say, is it good enough for Sharon? Completely changes the way that you think about it.
I'll give a really concrete example for my game, because it's a narrative game and sort of the primary target audience is adult women who maybe like read a lot but don't play a ton of games. We are taking great care to make sure that the controls are very smooth, easy, intuitive to use. I think to a much higher degree than if it's like, oh, this is a first-person shooter. Like, everyone knows the controls on first-person shooters. Like, we don't have to explain it. We don't have to make like 3 different options because maybe some people want to click, maybe some people want to use the keyboard. Like, we're sort of like, okay, our audience, and also I know because I am a little bit this person, if I can't figure out how to play a game within the first 5 minutes, I just close it and possibly return it. So like, it has to be very obviously playable.
Absolutely.
We had the same thing with Stray Gods, because one of our core audience demographics is fans of music theatre, which do overlap a lot more with games than you would expect, but there's still this whole section. And so, yeah, the team really built the mechanics to be extremely accessible, and the difficulty in the game is the decision-making, not the physical inputs. And my mum was over the other day and I made her play the game, and she's never held a controller in her life, but she could play it. And it was like, oh, okay, she's the demographic. She loves musical theatre and Greek gods. So like, we're in.
Fantastic. All right. So we're moving on to advice now. So Alex, I'm going to have you lead this one. I'll let you finish your water, and I'll say the question really slowly. What's the best way to get your foot in the door?
All right. I think probably the best way to get your foot in the door, and the way that I did it at least, was to kind of know people, and if you don't know people, get to know people. And the best way to get to know people is to make yourself useful. I got involved in the games industry first running social media for the New Zealand Games Festival, which was not, I mean, by some people's standards, is not working in games because I wasn't making games, but it's still working in the games industry. And that was a volunteer role. So I was just syncing up with the team that was organizing the festival, and they'd say, we need you to promote this. And I worked in content marketing at the time, and I was like, great, I know how to make content. I will post about it on social media. Easy, done. And then through working with all of the people there, I actually worked closely with the person who would be my first boss in games, because she could see from me working as the social media person that I was great to work with. And she knew that I was a writer. She'd seen some of my writing on my social posts. And yeah, basically showing people that you exist, and that you're likable and kind and nice to work with, is a great way to show people that they should hire you.
I can maybe speak to this from the other side as the person who does the hiring for my studio. Is definitely the showing, like, I think the proving that you can be useful, I think was making yourself useful. And this can be not, because I don't have people volunteer for my studio, that would be weird unpaid labor. But showing that like you've read the Steam page, that you actually understand what game you're applying to work on, and why you would like to work on that game, and how you think that your, skill set, can dovetail nicely with what we're trying to do, and sort of how you can add value, right? Because, you have some money, you don't have a lot of money, you want to make sure that you're spending it on the person who's going to add the most value. So you want to make it really clear what your value proposition is. While I have the microphone, I'll go on a slight tangent. When submitting portfolios, a good way to show what your value is to have a range of work. I have hired for art positions, and I have been inundated with portfolios that are exclusively sexy elves, like sexy fantasy characters. My game has 0 fantasy. It has 0 sexy people in it. So then I'm sitting there looking at like a sexy elf, feeling a bit embarrassed that I have this up on my monitor, like large monitor where other people are walking behind me and can see this, trying to figure out if like the way that the light is reflecting off like the boob armor shows that you understand shading and composition. It would be so much better if there were a variety of things in the portfolio that, would really show that without me having to go digging for it. And shows, okay, like, here's what I've got in mind. Oh, this person can do that, rather than me guessing. I haven't hired for writers, but I imagine it would be similar. Like, have a little bit of comedy, have a little bit of like serious, have a little bit of dialogue, have a little bit of what else? What other flavors of things do you
Horror, mystery.
Yeah. Horror, mystery. Yeah, just like try to show don't hide your value. If you can do it, make it known that you can do it.
I think you're like so not alone in that, because I had a conversation with the then hiring manager for Big Ant Studio at like a IGDAM meetup like 2-3 years ago. And she was just like, send me a tennis racket that you've 3D modeled and I'll hire you. Stop sending me like bows and swords. Not that that's not fun to make, but just like,
Yeah, I got a lot of 3D modeling profiles who like they had modeled all sorts of weapons. Again, 0 weapons in my game. Cool, you can model an AK-47. Like, what about like a building?
Not to take us away from sexy elf content, but like to go back to like the showing up and also just sort of being kind. The people that I think that you should also know, in terms of like, you're like, oh, I need to know people. You should like not just prioritize people that you meet who might give you an opportunity, like people who like have a studio or whatever. You should be prioritizing or just being like in general just nice and getting to know like people at meetups that you would consider your peers, because you are way more likely to get hired by a friend or a peer that you have like seen a dozen times over the monthly meetups, or like at like different because you see the same faces if you go to a bunch of the industry meetups, you see the same people over and over again. You eventually like you get to know each other, and when it does come up that you have like, or somebody has like a role that they need to fill, or they need to put some names down for a funding application, or there's a position open at the work, it's going to be their friends or the people that they know that are nice that they're going to like ping first, maybe before a job goes up, or reach out to be like, hey, can you join me on this? It's not going to be that person they met once at an industry meetup who like gave them a card or gave them a resume. So yeah, just like it's always going to be the people that you come up with that. Yeah,
it's like approach networking like you're making friends, or at least meeting people and not meeting job opportunities.
I think it goes back to what you said earlier about being kind. Like, yeah. I think it's like a huge part of just be nice, make friends with people, be amiable.
I would add like be honest and be who you are, because you don't want to get hired for being a different person than you actually are, because then everyone's sad. Just be yourself.
Yeah.
Also, regardless of job opportunities, I think it's really nice to have like a group of friends who are in a similar professional position as you. So even if it's a group of people to like get beers with and be like, man, I got rejected like 9 times this week. And they're like, yeah, me too. That itself is really powerful. And you'll grow through things together. Some of my most valued like professional friends are people who are in very similar situations to me. And like, we can't really offer each other much, but like support and camaraderie and commiseration.
I want to backtrack real quickly all the way back to volunteering from the very start. I also want to mention game jams, which are, I think we know what game jams are, but if you don't, it's usually like 48 hours to make a game with a team of strangers. It's a great way to get to meet people and build your portfolio, so you can build a wide variety of things to show potential hiring people. But you can also meet your peers and other people at the same level or slightly more experienced or less experienced in the industry and just make something cool, make some friends, have fun.
You also work in a team. That's the big one. You
Yeah.
work in a high-pressure environment with like a dev team for a 48-hour period. It's like, it's work experience. It's like, I cannot like state enough how important game jams are. Just do as many as you possibly can. Like, all the time. It's just, it's everything. It's every single thing off the list. Like teamwork, meeting people, like you said, creating product, putting it in your portfolio, like failing fast, experimenting. It like encompasses so many excellent things that'll really help you grow. So yeah, game jam it up all the time. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next question now. And I'm going to have Maddy lead this one. What advice would you have given yourself when you first started trying to enter the games industry?
Okay, this is an interesting one because I, again, didn't intend to enter the games industry. And one day I sort of just woke up and was like, I'm in the games industry. However, for other people, I think it's really what we just talked about. Like make friends, being surrounded by people who don't think you're crazy is a really, really beautiful thing. And sometimes you'll think you're crazy. And so having the friends be like, no, like quitting your corporate job to make a video game. Great idea. Like keep doing that. And yeah, just get your game into people's hands as early and often. Because on the plus side, if people tell you they like it, that's like the thing that can keep you going when, you're trying something the 8th way and it's still not working and, maybe you haven't had breakfast and everything just feels a bit hard. But then also conversely, like the first thing you make, the first way you make it is never going to be great. And you can either have a small group of caring people tell you that when it's still very like easy and cheap to make changes, or you can have the general public on the internet tell you that when you release. And I think one of those is a lot like cuddlier and nicer than the other. So,
Katy, thoughts?
I agree. No, I think the advice that I would have given myself was just you can work in games, because I really didn't think that it was an option. And I think a lot of that was me looking at the skills that I had and the skills I was planning to acquire and not even considering that they would apply so cleanly into games, which they have. Like I don't know how many months of the year we're in now, but I started in January and it's so clearly within my wheelhouse. I can do the job that I'm doing. I have all of the skills, not from studying games, but from acting and media. Who would have thunk it? Even my cosplay Instagram was something that like genuinely has made my work. Yeah. So I think like Katy, look at actually what you do and what your skills are and maybe have a little bit more self-confidence that you are capable and you should try.
Actually, can I amend my answer based on that? So I'm someone with a computer science degree who does art in my spare time. It still did not occur to me until I was 29 that, maybe games are something that I should do, because I didn't really see that many games that I was interested in getting made. And I certainly, what you read about the games industry online is, it's super toxic. Like, you're moving from normal software to games. Like you've gone from bad to worst in how you're going to be treated. Like, it just really hasn't been what I've expected. I've only really met lovely, smart, kind, talented people who, like everyone on this panel, have come from like really different backgrounds. So I guess like I could go back to my 18-year-old self and be like, maybe you should try to get into the games industry.
I love that.
I have a much less inspirational answer, which is what I did tell myself, and it worked out for me, which is that you don't have to work in games, by which I mean I struggled a lot to get into the games industry. It was really hard to get my first games job because, as I mentioned before, there's not a lot of, especially narrative work in New Zealand. And so I didn't. I went and worked for a marketing agency, and I did hate it. But I learnt a lot of really, really useful skills that actually then led to me getting into the games industry, because I learned how to do marketing, and then I volunteered in a marketing role. And then eventually that led to me doing exactly what I always wanted to do. So I think being willing to try other things, and you don't have to give up on the dream, the goal, but keep learning, even if it doesn't seem like a direct path.
I think that's a really good comment in terms of like just keep learning skills. And often like I think a barrier for people is, and like I said before, that like invisible wall for me was like thinking at like 16, like I can't do maths. I think a lot of us have like a lot of maths phobia baked into us from the terrible way that high school teaches maths. And like you have like no application for any of the like math stuff that you get taught, and like it's actually fun to learn sometimes for that's the worst thing I could have said. But just that like if there's like a skill that you're like, oh, if I had this, I could start making my own games, like whether it was like programming or like making art or like just the time, or like if I feel like you can bridge those gaps, and it'll probably once you start be easier than you think. Especially I found that for programming, like you can get pretty far without great math skills. And like for making your own art for it, especially for like something like a game jam. First game jam I went to, I didn't have any programming skills. I couldn't make any art. I like could write, but I didn't know how to like write for like games or anything. I still had a great time, like just because you learn so much. And in fact, I'd say like that's also the best way to approach a game jam is like, don't go into it expecting to make Untitled Goose Game, but instead like just go into it thinking like I'm going to learn something cool. And yeah.
I'll also put in a plug here to think really carefully if you want to make games your career, if it's your escape, if it's your hobby, if it's your joy. Making it your full-time job is going to change things. I really like having it as my full-time job, so like for me it was the right choice, but like I think it's also okay to give yourself the permission of like, actually, yeah, I do want to buy a house. I do want a steady paycheck. Like I want to be able to afford nice things, and then I'll make my game on like nights or weekends. And I think sometimes there's a bit of a stigma against that of like, oh, you're not like a true artist unless you're starving and toiling away. There's no need to make yourself miserable if that's not what you want to be doing. So I think if games is your escape from the world and how you de-stress after work, like have some thoughts about, okay, if it was my full-time job, what would that look like for me? And yeah, be nice to yourself however you want to engage with it.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with art for the sake of art. Like if that's what you want to do, that's totally fine, and it can end up being the same pathway. You could do that for years and years and years, and then decide, actually, I'm going to go and make something commercial now. Or you can make something commercial and then decide, you know what, I hate commercial and I'm going to make art for the sake of art, and that's fine. You can jump back and forth on that 20 times. It does not matter. Just as long as you know, like when you're going into it, are you making art for the sake of art, or are you trying to make a commercial product? Because the setup can be quite different. So I'm going to round it out there with a little summary, and we're going to go into a Q&A. So we've talked about some really beautiful concepts here about building yourself up to be a person that can work well in a studio. We've touched upon that idea of like, can't draw, can't code, therefore can't work in games is a barrier that you can just push right down and just jump in there and do a game jam and learn and grow. So, think about the things that you're deciding that you can't do and just jump in and learn, because you'd be surprised by how much you can grow. We've talked about how important it is to have vision and understanding like marketing and personas when you're designing a game, and how important it is just to be kind and be a reasonable person and make good impressions, and all the different skill sets that you can pull from what you're currently doing into the games industry. We've talked about curiosity and failing fast and being good at communicating and understanding that money and time is a resource and what good enough is, and understanding that not everyone knows what a double jump is. And we talked about just being genuine. Like effective networking is the way I like to put it is it's planting seeds, not harvesting fruit. It's like you shouldn't come in with an objective and try to be transactional. You should just be making friends and making connections, because you never know what you're going to get out of all the friends that you can make if you just are a genuine person. And we touched upon sexy elves.
We didn't touch the sexy elves. I would like to make that very clear, Ceri.
But it's important to have like variety in the things that you do, and when applying for jobs, understand what it is the job that you're applying for, so that you can custom build your portfolio application around that. And then we hit upon testing early and taking criticism and feedback as soon as you possibly can to build a robust product, because you don't want the internet to tell you that. It's basically, we've rounded out the idea that it's all part of the journey as long as you're still learning, and you can work in games. So now we're going to head over to the Q&A. All right, so James is going to walk around with a microphone, and if anyone has a question, put your hand up, and we'll do a few minutes of Q&A before we eat some delicious food. All right, thanks so much.
No problem. First of all, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Personally, I find it very rewarding to learn about from these experiences, because it's not like you can live so many other people's lives. My name is Sergey. My question is, how do you deal with uncertainty? We are, as a starting studio, we face a lot of moments where we just don't know whether we're doing the right thing. Big or small, is our code architecture right? Did we choose the right genre? Should we spend the evening to go to an IGEA event? And most of the time there is no answer to that. You'll probably never know one way or another. Did you have these moments in your experiences, and how did you go about?
Can I answer this one? So yes, you have these experiences all day, every day. They don't go away, because when you solve certain ones, just like new exciting anxieties pop up. I like to approach it pretty methodically. If I realize I'm sort of spinning on a choice, I try to say what information would make me feel better about making this choice. So like, because I'm a programmer, if you're saying, is our architecture right? Okay, what could make you feel better about that? Would it be watching some YouTube videos? Would it be getting someone else who you think knows more to take a look and say, yes, that looks good, it doesn't look good? And sometimes this is when you find out it's not like a rational anxiety, is there nothing that could make you feel better about it? And that's a useful thing to know too. So then you think about what would make you feel better about it, figure out if it's something you can reasonably act on. If it is, great. You act on it, you try to get more information. But if you do realize, oh, this is something like, are we making the right game? You need a crystal ball for that, or, there's just no way you're going to get that information. And so then I try through practice to just let that one go and deal with the ones that have more concrete answers.
Yeah, I think I'd like to touch upon the idea of fail fast here. Of just like that it is just about experimenting and getting in there and doing absolutely as much as you possibly can with the time that you have, and then seeing what sticks and what doesn't, because the faster you fail, the faster you learn. And when you mentioned that idea of like having different problems, it reminded me of one of my favorite game dev quotes from Trent from League of Geeks, which is, we're having tons of problems, but they're not the same problems as last year, so we must be doing better.
I think the fail fast thing is great as well. I think there is a flip side to the fail fast thing, which is also make sure that you are like consistently practicing gratitude for your successes, because like often there are problems that are like so like nebulous and that you cannot solve. Like, are we making the right game? And like there's a lot of like anxiety to like working in this industry sometimes. And as soon as you achieve something, it's often very quickly, whether that's like your university capstone game finishes, or like you go to a game jam, or like you go to like an IGEA event, and like you should celebrate those things, because often, like I know for me, I was like constantly being like, oh, I want to get if I just get my first like role in games, like that'll be great, and then you get it and it feels great for like a month and then you're like complaining about your job, and that happens I think like consistently all the time, whether it's on like a small scope in terms of like the problems that you're solving week to week, but also like long term, like whether or not you get funding or something. Yeah, it feels amazing, and then you're like, if you don't celebrate those things, it can quickly you can revert back to just worrying about the things you can't control. So just for
Actually, maybe this is just me rephrasing failing fast, I'm not sure. But you can, like, for things like, are we making the right game, you can to some extent kind of test your ideas. Like, be willing to put what you can in front of an audience and ask them how they feel about it, and like do that regularly, because you're going to make all sorts of different changes and people might feel different ways about decisions you've made. But yeah, like basically just ask other people, ask your audience, is this what you want?
Thank you very much.
Hey guys, great stuff so far. Bit of a broadish question, but either from your experience or just answer the hypothetical, would you rather give the sort of veto power to the sort of time-focused producer, or maybe the game lead who's got a more clearer picture of the vision?
How much money do you have?
yeah. I'd probably still give it to the producer, like as someone who's like kind of doing both things, and also because I worked on Need for Speed, I was like a designer who is like maybe like more on the other end of like, how can we make this game fun and good? Whether or not the game is fun or good only matters if the game exists, and if the game doesn't get played by people at the end of the day, what was the point? Like, if the game doesn't get made, then like it doesn't exist. So I would give it to the producer. Like yeah.
I think this also touches upon something that I think is really important, which is the idea of minimum viable product. Like, and when you're designing, you should always be boiling it down to the simplest idea. Like that you want to be able to explain the idea with in 10 seconds or less, or 10 words or less. And I think that when you design in that way, and you're going for minimum viable product, and then you're reiterating and building until you can get, you start with your skateboard and you build your way to the Ferrari, like that is the effective way to design and build. And I feel like the producer versus like, lead designer question is almost like that idea of like, should we have gigantic scope, or should we have, clear milestones? And as you can probably tell from my answers, like clear milestones. So like if it also gets you into that mindset of like, take your big idea and just keep boiling it down. And because the simpler it is to explain, it's going to be the best version of that idea, because it doesn't get too convoluted. So I love producers. So yeah, I think that's an excellent question.
Yeah, it's kind of a continuation of the idea of MVP is with everything being like digital marketplaces now, your game is going to be patched. Just it is. So you can put out the bare basic form of a feature. Obviously, you still want it to look polished and nice so that players aren't just like, what is this? But put out the smallest version of it and then make it bigger slowly. You don't have to go all in all at once. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for everything so far. So I had a question about work-life balance in the industry, and I know the game industry doesn't have a particularly good reputation, at least on AAA studios, of with crunch and a lot of burnout and all that. How do you personally find managing a work-life balance working in indie games, and when you're controlling a lot of, at least for the people who are in charge of studios, managing that balance?
If I'm incapacitated in some way, the game can't get made. So it's actually pretty active risk management for my studio that I don't become incapacitated through burnout or other accident or injury.
Yeah, I'd so agree with that.
So it's actually like a business imperative to not, in terms of like practical things. I work pretty normal working hours, if not a little bit short, like 10 to 5. Usually Monday through Friday. I try not to work on the weekends. I have a rule with myself that if I am physically in my bed, I'm not allowed to think about my game. And that stops some like late night loops.
Yeah, I'm still quite early into it, but that's definitely like something I strive for. I'd say I normally do work very similar, like 10 to 5. Like with the occasional, like it's hard not to think about it, especially when it's like you're so invested in things, like it's like an active effort. Just I think like it's something you have control over as much as it might be difficult. Yeah.
Thank you.
An employee, you need to be really strict about your boundaries. You have working hours, and you shouldn't be engaging in anything work-related outside of working hours. You can get like an app that will, because for some reason Gmail doesn't have this built in, that will shut off your Gmail notifications after certain hours. Like just uninstall, if you're going on holiday, uninstall Slack from your phone, and set up an autoresponder that sends like funny messages anytime someone tags you. That's it.
I just want to add, I don't make the decisions in my studio. It all comes from the top down. But I think when you're at the top, you set the culture for your workers. And so I'm really lucky at Summerfall. We have a 4-day work week, and my manager is really on me at not working outside of the hours. So my first couple of months, I was a chronic trying to stay back and she would be like, "It's 5 o'clock, Katy, you need to go home." And she literally for 2 months straight would stare at me at 5 p.m. and make me leave. She still texts me if she's like, "Why are you on Slack? Why are you online? Stop it, go home." And I think that, like providing that environment, so I feel really supported in that. Just the other day, I had a sniffly nose, I was in my stand-up, and my whole team went, "Katy, go home. Like you're not going to function how we need you. We're not going to get any progress done, and you feel crappy and you're going to be sad. So don't do that. Like go rest up." And I came back the next day and I was rejuvenated and I was okay and I loved my co-workers. And then even outside of the physical stuff, I'm really like outing myself as trying to work way too hard and then other people pushing me down. But this is the thing, you want to set the culture so that I will break out of this habit. But I recently was given the keys to our Steam forums, which was very, very scary for me. And I was incredibly overwhelmed. And I shared that with my manager. And I was just like, "Hey, I had a little cry. Gamers TM are very scary." And she was like, "You know what? If this is too much for you, like you don't have to do that. Like it's not worth putting you through something that is going to emotionally damage you." And so we came together and we negotiated and I did some more learning and we understand what was making me anxious in terms of my skill set. And I did end up taking it on, but only because I knew I could put it away safely and without penalty.
I'm going to touch upon 2 ideas for this question as well, because this is a very good one. So defining the culture to avoid crunch, I kind of feel like is in 2 sections. First, for the individual, it's avoiding burnout. And I really read a great book once about reciprocity and the act of giving. And there was a chapter on how giving personalities overcommit and they burn themselves out. And the way the study basically said that one of the ways to prevent this is to build in moments of gratitude and recognition. It's to constantly be able to see the results of your work. Because if you keep pushing yourself and you don't have those moments where you're able to see that you're making a difference, you'll burn out. So in terms of the individual, like if you're within a company or you're a solo developer, you need to build in moments where you've finished milestones and you look back and you congratulate yourself and you take a moment to celebrate what you've done. And that's going to really break that up and stop you from, prevent you from burning out as much as possible. And then the second half of this is, as a leader, how do you institute a culture that doesn't crunch? And I believe Kim Forrest, who's Keywords South Australia, said something really, really great about this, which was you don't prevent crunch, you avoid it. So people coming in being like, we won't crunch, are always the people who crunch, every single time. But the people who want to avoid crunch will come in and they'll make a plan, and then they'll make a plan to plan very regularly, and then they'll make a plan for when everything fails, and then they need to completely reiterate. So you just plan, so that you can keep seeing, 3, 6, 9 weeks ahead of you, and see where the bottlenecks are, and do your best to avoid it, not prevent it. Great question. So we might wrap there, but we're going to a networking section now, so you're more than welcome to ask us these questions in person over a drink and some food. But I want to thank my panelists so much for this. All right, thanks everyone. We'll go to the back and eat some delicious food. Thanks for joining us.